Hi everyone. This day 12 months ago I made my first video on the Covid-19 laws. At the time, many people said I was both trivialising the severity of Covid-19 and exaggerating the powers that both the Minister for Health and the Gardaí would assume and exercise arising from the enactment of the Health Preservation Act. The purpose of this video is not to seek vindication, because there is no victory to be sought from the tyranny we now live under. That said, let's take some clips from my video on the 4th of April 2020 to see whether the words I spoke in that video hold true. In response to the Covid-19 virus, the Irish government has enacted two extraordinary pieces of legislation that it is currently and will quite likely for many months to come use to control the freedom of people living in Ireland in an unprecedented and profound way. Ask yourself how much freedom you have, or how much protection from government overreach the Irish Constitution affords you if the Irish government can, inside 48 hours, grant themselves the power to determine what aspects of your life are necessary or unnecessary, such as whether your business can remain open, whether you are allowed to go to work, whether you can travel over 2 kilometres from your house for exercise, or whether your trip to the shop is essential depending on what items you bought. Whether you personally find these measures necessary or not, you should be acutely aware of how easy it was for the government to grant themselves this power over your freedom, and ask yourself the question, are these restrictions on human rights proportionate? I wish to make clear that I am using my freedom to respect the request to social distance, to work from home and to only make necessary journeys. However, I am unsure how I will feel if I am subjected to Gardaí interrogation in order to establish if my activities are considered essential, subject to the regulations which the Minister has enacted. I'm not saying that you should not abide by these laws, but what I am saying is that you should be asking questions about whether these laws are proportionate, whether they are constitutional, and recognise what not asking questions might mean for the freedoms of every citizen in this country into the future. I am not a doctor or a scientist, but I do know a lot of doctors and scientists are asking valid questions around the categorisation of deaths arising from Covid-19 and whether the restrictions placed on freedoms are justified by the medical information available. As a lawyer and a citizen of Ireland, the powers the government have granted to themselves make me very uneasy. So if you are to take anything away from this video, I ask you to consider the following. Number 1, the possibility of this Act setting a precedent for similar legislation. What immediately springs into my mind is climate change. Number 2, the power granted to the Minister for Health is frightening and is more akin to the control exercised by communist states. 3, regulations must be implemented to enforce Section 10 of the Act that would restrict your movements, and the Minister may amend these regulations at any time. And number 4, question everything. We are now 12 months into the most severe erosion of human rights and civil liberties ever experienced in Ireland since we became a free state. In other times, those exerting such power and control originated from foreign lands. But those who have stripped you of your freedom were elected by the people of this country. We all know that the motivations of those in government is to remain in government, and this means that we have the power to make change happen. While we could be forgiven for allowing the Health Preservation Act to pass in March of 2020, in light of the fact we genuinely did not know how severe Covid-19 was going to be, and also because many of us were not in tune with how and when the legislation would be passed. But some 13 months later, there is absolutely no excuse for any inaction we exercise, and let us be under no doubt that the people who will suffer the most from our inaction will be our children. The main purpose of this video is to advise you that Part 3 of the Health Preservation Act is due to be extended before the 9th of June 2021. This is very important because Part 3 is the piece of legislation that the government have used to mandate the closure of businesses and churches, to restrict movements, to enforce the wearing of face coverings, and to make protesting illegal. With the exception of mandatory quarantine on entering the state, if Part 3 of the Health Preservation Act is not extended before the 9th of June, all other restrictions on freedoms will cease. What this means is that we have a window of 2 months inside which to lobby TDs to ensure they vote against the extension of Part 3 of the Health Preservation Act. With this in mind, I will be releasing a suite of letters and instructions over the next week, so I ask you to please watch for this announcement, as we will only be targeting certain TDs. This project has the single biggest chance at reversing the erosion of freedoms in the shortest space of time. But to have any chance of success, we need thousands and thousands of people to stand with us and act. This project will last for 8 weeks, and we will need your support consistently over this period of time. On a personal note, when I think of what the government, the media and the Gardaí have done to this country and its people over the past 12 months, I feel a distressing sense of anger, because I know the reason the government have made mandatory all of the current restrictions is because they do not believe you can be trusted to make informed decisions for yourself. They do not believe you can or will exercise a sufficient degree of care over yours or others' safety. And they do not believe you can decide what risks to assume for yourself and your family. Not only that, but they have created a deep sense of fear and confusion through disturbing levels of propaganda. They have granted the Gardaí extraordinary powers, which have led to people being fined and jailed for taking children to deserted beaches, for cycling more than 5 kilometres from home, for travelling what they consider to be an unreasonable distance to buy food. In the exercise of this power, I have noticed that the Gardaí are selectively choosing who to punish, and I cannot help but notice that those in support of personal freedom have been targeted in greater numbers. While it was okay to protest for Black Lives Matter, it was not okay to protest for the freedom of everyone on the island of Ireland. If this was truly a free country, the government would support your right to decide the risks and benefits of your own actions and recognise that you are personally responsible for yourself. But the reality is that the government have exercised an unconscionable level of control over your life, and I believe they do not intend to surrender that control voluntarily. To conclude, I wish to ask you the following questions. Have you sacrificed enough? When was the last time you saw your grandparents? When was the last time you brought your children to the playground to play with other children? When was the last time your family gathered together for a meal? When was the last time you took a journey without fear of being punished by the Gardaí? When was the last time your business was allowed to open? When was the last time you saw a smile on another person's face? Have you sacrificed enough? Thanks for listening.